Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are approaching the 2036 All-Star break. We are at the exact midway point of the season, and we are 46-35 in Buffalo, 2.5 games behind in the NL East, third in the division. We would be in a wild card spot if the season were to end today. We're up 2 games on the last wild card spot. So we're not in a horrible position, and as we reviewed at the end of our last episode, we have a excellent pitching staff and a pretty good offense and an acceptable defense, and our Pythagorean number is a lot bigger than the 46 wins that we have at this point. So feeling pretty good that we are in good position to make the playoffs for a 9th consecutive year, and still think there is certainly a chance that when all is said and done, we'll win the NL East for, I think it would be a 4th straight season at this point, and potentially have the best record in baseball. And I think that might also be a 4th straight year of that. I guess instead of just making this stuff up, I could actually go and look at it and know where we stand. Yeah, it would be a 4th consecutive division title if we're able to come back, and I believe that we've had the best record in baseball 3 years running at this point as well. But the goal is ultimately to win a World Series, which we've done only once in the 10-plus seasons of this playthrough. And apologies that we haven't been posting as much this past week. It was just a crazy week at work. Very busy, and some late nights. So unfortunately that prevented me from playing a little OOTP on the side, but we are back now. Probably won't be in a position where we'll be putting out new episodes every day like we have for parts of the last few months, but hopefully we'll be out there every other day at the very least. But if I'm gone for a few days and I haven't mentioned that I'll be traveling or away, it's most likely that I just got busy with work and or life rather than me being trapped under a big rock somewhere. And appreciate the thoughts in the last episode, helping me figure out exactly why the lock had showed up for Matthew Wenzel when I sent him down. I never see the lock. I know some of you were like, why doesn't Old School Sports know what the lock is? He's a dumb idiot. But I basically only play GM only, and the setting that I change every time is to let me be in charge of promotions and demotions. So it's really something that I don't recall seeing, although I'm sure I saw it years ago when I first started playing the game. But the issue was and is that I have a manager, as we talked about a few episodes ago, who wants to change the strategy settings for me. So I had to go in to each individual player's strategy settings and click on lock to team / enable strategy settings to give myself full control. But that also disables the AI promotion and demotion of the players. So when I sent Wenzel down, that is why the lock showed up, because now the AI promotion and demotion is disabled. So if I turn that off, we have lost that annoying lock from Mr. Wenzel. And as we talked about at the end of last episode, the reason Wenzel got sent down was a trade that we just made for Elvin Jimenez. I didn't just make, I guess we made it a week or so ago at this point. I feel like he is going to really bolster our bullpen. He is a guy who's arbitration eligible, so we can potentially keep him around next year as a hopefully good right-handed arm out of our bullpen if we so desire, and think that he is a step up from Wenzel this year in terms of helping us to try to get back on top of the NL East and make a long run in the playoffs. No guarantees that Wenzel won't be on the playoff roster if we decide we want another left-handed arm in the playoffs. But for right now, he's a guy who had options, so we've sent him down. And he also had been one of the weaker performing members of our pitching staff, although with a 4.18 ERA over 23 and two-thirds innings, not horrible. The 152 whip certainly could use improvement, and his ERA plus and his FIP minus were both below average, and he's actually been below replacement level, so maybe he's a little worse even than I had thought. So no guarantees that he will be back for the playoffs, but does give us some depth. So I don't think it's going to be an incredibly busy approach to the trade deadline in this episode. We don't have a ton of money to bring on players, so we're going to have to find guys who are cheap or guys whose teams are willing to keep a huge chunk of their contract. Or I guess we could always tinker with scouting and player development if we needed to. And we also don't have huge holes to fill. Another thing that I had talked about earlier that I guess I could just actually show you is we're in the top handful of just about all batting categories, including third in runs scored. We're in the top one or two of almost every pitching category. And defensively, our efficiency is great, and our zone rating is pretty poor. So we kind of average out to mediocre there. But after a rough month of May, we've been playing better in June and July. And the goal is to keep that going. Hopefully put a bunch of players on the All-Star team. And the big saga in Buffalo this year is the future of Deshaun Seifu, who's on pace to lead the National League in steals a ninth consecutive year, leading the league in batter war, and after winning his first batting title last year, could be in a position to win an MVP award for us this year. But the reason it's a saga is that he is in the final year of his contract that we signed with him many years ago. And because of our financial limitations at this point, we don't have the flexibility to even make him a reasonable offer to bring him back. So we are kind of waiting to see whether the great Shamar Jenneret, who has won a National League MVP and a World Series MVP in 2 seasons with Buffalo, while leading the league in ribbies both times, will opt out of his contract this coming offseason. If Jenneret does that, can probably bring Seifu back. If he doesn't, we're going to have to get very creative to keep Seifu in the organization. But these are all things that we will figure out in due course in the coming months. Right now, we are focused on the next few weeks as we approach the All-Star game and the trade deadline. And it ended up being a pretty good week on the field for our Buffalo Wings as we approached the All-Star break. We did lose 2 out of 3 in Montreal, but after that we swept 4 games against Pittsburgh at home. Had a couple of shutout victories, 7-0 over Montreal, 4-0 over Pittsburgh. So as we hit the All-Star break, we're in as good a position as we've been all year, tied for first with the Phillies finally, and half a game up on the Braves, 5 up on the Pirates after sweeping them. Those 4 straight losses for them certainly helped us against them in the standings. And at the All-Star break, Seifu leading the league in steals, leading the league in batter war. Juan Estrada still has a nice hitting streak going. Alexis Barajas leading the league in ERA with a glittering 2.03. Juan Carrillo tied for second in the league in wins. And now, let's go find out who made the All-Star team for us. I would think at least a couple of those guys that we just talked about among the league leaders should be on the All-Star team. And not surprisingly, Alexis Barajas, All-Star for us, 9-3 record, league best 2.03 ERA, 128 strikeouts in 111 innings, only 23 walks allowed. 3.8 pitcher WAR on the season. Our ace is having another good, solid year for us in Buffalo. Arbitration eligible for the final time this coming off season. So similar to Mr. Seifu, a guy who will be needing to figure out exactly what to do with over the next 6 to 18 months. Bit more of an accelerated time frame with Seifu, obviously. I'd say somewhat surprisingly, given that we have by far the best pitching staff in the National League, Barajas is our only All-Star. So that, to me, is a bit surprising. Looking at the everyday players, though, we go down, and no surprise to see Seifu named an All-Star for the fourth time in his career. He had a long gap. He was an All-Star in 28 and 29, and then didn't make the All-Star team again till last year. But he's on the team again this year. And having another fantastic season, hitting .319, 55 of 59 on the base paths, 31 doubles and 9 triples already, 73 runs scored, 142 WRC plus, which I believe would be the best of his career, and that league best 4.6 WAR. As I talked about, looking to lead the league in steals for a 9th consecutive year, and he's also regularly been among the league leaders in at-bats, runs, hits, and triples, and certainly seems in the mix in all of those categories this year. Could also lead the league in doubles potentially for a second time. And he's got a chance at his second batting title of his career also. So it'll be real interesting if we can keep the former number 1 overall pick in our organization for the long term and try to steer him to hopefully another couple of championships and a Hall of Fame career. But again, that's a bridge that we will cross this coming off season. Other than Barajas and Seifu, anyone else on the All-Star team for our Buffalo Wings? Steve Anderson, I like that one. The young shortstop who's actually still in a platoon, but is the left-handed batter. He's the guy who plays more often. Hitting .262 with 19 doubles and 12 homers in 275 at-bats, 1.6 WAR on the season. Respectable defensively, respectable offensively. Former first-round draft pick, will be 25 years old this offseason. Off to a nice start in his career with his first All-Star award. And Shamar Jenneret, despite having a bit of an off-season by his standards with only a 130 WRC plus, with 14 homers and 65 ribbies and a 280 batting average, named an All-Star once again. As we talked about, the drama this offseason is going to be whether Jenneret opts in or out. And hopefully he'll be making that decision after a even better second half than his first half of the year. And hopefully he'll be making that decision after helping the Buffalo Wings to a second World Series championship in his 3 seasons with our squad. And we split 2 games in Washington after the All-Star break. So that leaves us with 4 at home against the Mets, and then trip out to Toronto, and then out to Boston to finish off the month of July. 1 game back now, so obviously that means that the Phillies played a little better than us coming out of the All-Star break. The Braves have also gotten by us in the standings, but 3 teams separated by 1 game in the NL East. With the way our stats are looking at this point, I don't think we're going to do too much, but at least going to check in on who's available on the trade block, and then offline I'll spend some time investigating some other options. If we could bring on a huge center fielder, that would be an obvious thing that would help us. Don't really see a huge center fielder being available. Shamar Badio, who I believe we talked about a couple of years ago, I think was it in the I think it was in the trade market. I think he doesn't have the best personality in the world, but Milwaukee had him on the trade block I don't know whether it was 1 season ago, 2 seasons ago, but they were still looking for full value for him despite some of his personality quirks. Having a pretty good offensive season, 265 average, 19 doubles, 17 homers, 121 WRC plus on the year. Solid defensive second baseman. Not great, but solid. Would certainly prefer for a second baseman that turn double play rating to be higher. But not a huge need for us. Dylan Cruz honestly would not even be as good in center field for us as the always controversial James Wood. Probably would be a better bat, but the glove not as good, and he's also fragile. He's making a ton of money, so I don't think that is something that we will seriously pursue. Jefferson Quero, the veteran catcher, another guy making a ton of money. He's he's definitely an offensive upgrade over Miller and Medina, but he's a big defensive downgrade from Andres Medina. Excuse me. Sorry for sneezing in your ear. Came on too quick that I wasn't even able to pause for you. So apologies if I did some damage to your eardrums, but he's much weaker defensively than Jefferson Quero, or he's much weaker defensively than Andres Medina. He is Jefferson Quero. And he's even a little weaker defensively than Miller. So given the machinations we'd have to go through to fit his salary or the amount of talent we'd likely need to give up to bring him on board with 100% salary retention, that's probably not going to work. Pitcher-wise, if we could add a big left-handed arm, that's something for us to at least think about. Question is whether there is a big enough left-handed arm to make it worth our while. Jackson Ferris is a fly ball pitcher with below-average movement. Seems like a guy who could give up some big homers in an inopportune time, although he's clearly a very good pitching profile overall. Raul Alcantara, don't love the lack of control. But still a pretty impressive profile, especially working out of the bullpen. But he's 35 years old, doesn't throw incredibly hard. And then there's also Cameron Johnson, another guy I worry about potentially giving up a big home run for us, and he has given up 6 and 40 innings this year, and 14 each of the 2 seasons before that, and well under 100 innings each season. So he brings a lot to the table with a great fastball and slider. But when you compare him in both of these guys to the lefties that we currently have in our bullpen, Lauren Walborn, much better movement on his pitches and extreme ground ball tendencies. Although, to be fair, Walborn has given up a lot of home runs the last 2 years. And then our other lefty out of the pen, Juan Veliz, another guy with better movement than either of those guys, ground ball tendencies. He actually has also given up a lot of home runs this year, though, but was very good at keeping the ball in the park a year ago when his ERA was half of what it is this season. But those guys fit the profile that I would tend to prefer. If we could add one of these players for almost nothing, I do have to be fair about it and recognize that Wenzel's movement isn't all that exceptional, and he's given up 4 homers in 23 2/3 innings this year. He doesn't throw incredibly hard either, and his stuff is not nearly the stuff that some of those other pitchers would potentially bring for us. So if we could add another big lefty for almost nothing, I think it's something for us to at least consider. The issue, again, is just that our pitching staff is so stacked that we would probably need to send the youngster Mike Waters, who's 24 years old and has been pretty good this year with a 2.70 ERA, although he has walked some batters. Send him back down to AAA. I guess his Sierra is materially higher than his ERA. He would be the guy who would go if we did decide to bring on another pitcher. Not necessarily fair. I don't think he's done anything to deserve a demotion, but we are a team that's trying to win it all. So if one of those lefties is available for a pittance, might be worth thinking about. And right now, 10 days before the trade deadline, doesn't seem like there's anything for us to do. The prices for all three of those lefty relievers were material and more than I want to pay. I checked in on Shamar Badio just for the heck of it, and the only player we can get him for straight up in a trade is Alexis Barajas, who could be on his way to winning a Cy Young Award, so we're certainly not going to do that. So there's potential for those prices to maybe get a little bit more reasonable over the next week or so, given that I don't feel we're in desperate straits to have to do something. At this point, I'm just going to wait. And fortunately, in this month of July, Shamar Jenneret has been on fire, which helps our team and also potentially encourages him to opt out of the contract, which, despite potentially losing his huge bat for next season, would give us a lot more optionality when building our team for the long term. He just hit a 6-game home run streak, so not quite to Dale Long, Don Mattingly, or Ken Griffey Jr. levels, but still an excellent streak for him. Unfortunately, Pat Mems, the reliever, has a dead arm, so he's going to be out for about a week. We'll probably be cautious with him, put him on the IL. We've got good pitchers in AAA to bring back up. Still 1 game behind, still in 3rd place. Carrillo looking for extension, another thing that we won't be able to talk about really seriously until we figure out what's going on with Mr. Jenneret. Split the 4 games at home with the Mets, and now we head on the road for Toronto and Boston. So we haven't been playing quite as well coming out of the All-Star break, 500 ball over those first 8 games after a really good start to the month of July. But we are still in a position where I don't think we need to do anything desperate. Although we're 3rd in the division, we're up 5.5 games on the last wild card spot. Seifu's still leading the league in steals and batter war. And although he is not on the leaderboards at this moment, Shamar Jenneret's season is getting a lot more interesting very quickly. You can see the little on fire next to him, and he's got the batting average up to 294 with 19 homers and 73 ribbies, the WRC plus up to 147. So to be able to make that type of progress over just a couple of weeks shows how incredibly he has been hitting the ball lately. Probably going to be in the mix for the National League Player of the Month for this month of July. And looking at his stats here on July 25th, would certainly think he would be in the mix. Hitting .320 this month with 9 homers and 19 ribbies. So if he hits another dinger, he'll have matched his output for the first 3 months of the season in terms of home runs. And a ridiculous 217 WRC plus and 1.220 OPS over this month. So we won't find out until after the trade deadline, but certainly Jenneret is making a case to win a Player of the Month award, which is something I'm sure he has done many times in his career. And following up on my unsupported assertion, he is a 9-time Player of the Week, but a 5-time Batter of the Month, as we were just talking about. So certainly has won a lot of hardware over the course of his career, and hopefully we'll add to it not just this month, but in the postseason and in the end of season awards also this year. And with that injury to Mems, we've revisited the trade block, and we've got something together for Cameron Johnson right now. Think that left-handed arm could definitely help us. He's not signed after this year, so it's not a long-term commitment. He's going to hit the free agent market, but his stuff against left-handed pitchers is pretty, or left-handed batters is pretty devastating. Think he's certainly an upgrade from Wenzel, who is probably who we would have brought up from the minors for Mems if we weren't going to make this trade. We get a small amount of cash back from the Yankees, and then we send them Jaden Hilaire. You may remember we picked him in the Rule 5 draft from Montreal over 3 years ago. He's been in our farm system for the last 3 seasons after we kept him up, and he's been fine for us. The profile is a decent major league reliever, a 5th starter perhaps, but he's at the point where he's out of option years right now. Not a big part of our future at almost 28 years old, given that we haven't had him in the majors for a few years at this point. He conceivably is a guy who we would waive in DFA at the end of this season anyways, just to ensure that we don't have that guaranteed $720,000 against our major league team for a guy that we don't have options with anymore. So not a huge expense as far as I'm concerned. He wasn't on the list of guys that they wanted, but I figured I'd give it a try, and looks like the Yankees want to do that. Might as well see if they can retain a little bit more of Johnson's salary, given that they are the New York Yankees. And as those of you know, I got sick of playing with the quote-unquote hard trade mode, which to me just made it take longer to get the trades that I wanted to get done mode. So turned that off a season or 2 ago. So it's a little easier to make trades now. It just makes things more efficient from my perspective. So we'll get the Yankees to keep some of his salary, throw in a little bit of cash. They've got rights to Jaden Hilaire going forward. Johnson will be a free agent after this year. But he should help us now. So a second trade for a reliever for us over the last month or so. Johnson will go right on to the major league roster. Have to figure out whether what exact role we want him in, since we've lost our closer Mems. I don't think we're going to put in Johnson as the closer. We'll have to decide what we want to do there. But don't know if we're going to do too much else before the trade deadline, but at least we're helping an already excellent bullpen and pitching staff. And although he hasn't been as successful this year in the stopper role as previous seasons, we're going to keep Lorne Walborn in the stopper role rather than move him into the closer, even though he's perhaps the most talented reliever that we have. The recently acquired Elvin Jimenez has been good for us. We're going to put him into the closer role for the time being. Johnson joins the team in a setup role, and then Waters and Veliz still working in middle relief, and Yinger and Susana still as our long relievers as we near the end of the month of July here. And as we head into the final few days before the trade deadline, we're back on top in the division, but still a very tough battle. A game up on the Braves, a game and a half on the Phillies. I don't think there's a deal to be had for us. We checked in on Dylan Cruz. He exercised his 10-5 rights. Badio, they were looking for a crazy amount, and he's no longer even on the trade block. I wonder whether he got dealt somewhere or if Milwaukee just decided to keep him, but it doesn't look like Milwaukee's having a real good season, so I'm guessing he probably got dealt somewhere. Yeah, the Chicago Cubs. Looks like the deal must have just happened today. Wonder what they got for him. AJ Fleeman and Jesus Moreno. AJ Fleeman is a rookie level batting prospect. Okay. Certainly not impressive. I mean, certainly not an incredible prospect. 3-star prospect, doesn't bring much defensively. Mediocre personality at best. Has a little home run power and can draw some walks if he fully develops. And then Jesus Moreno, he's a decent prospect as well. 23-year-old, hitting .291 with 11 homers in Double-A. Looks like he could be a interesting right fielder, maybe even a decent center or left fielder. Interesting prospect, not an incredible prospect, but looks like he could be a good, solid major league player potentially. I don't know if the two of them add up to a ace in Alexis Barajas, which is what Milwaukee said they wanted from us for him. And I didn't explore it too much. Clearly, we could have tried to put together a deal for prospects, but with the trade settings that we're on, I tend to think it would have been significantly more than what the Cubs gave up for him to have us bring him on board. And certainly adding a player like Badio would have helped our team, but I don't hate our infield right now with Flores and Heiner at first, Seifu at second, Edwards at third, and then Anderson and Hull in the platoon at shortstop, with Hull kind of normally serving as a utility guy for us. And as we've talked about in the past, we've also got Teagan Tiley, who was a former first-round pick down in AAA with Albany. He's pretty much fully developed almost to be a utility infielder anywhere for us. Hitting .269, only 6 home runs in AAA Albany. Does have 19 doubles, though. Still working on that home run power, but certainly wouldn't be against bringing him up if we needed some help in the infield. We've also got Alejandro Mercado, the former Rule 5 guy, who is very versatile defensively as well. Hitting .258 with 18 homers, who could be a competent utility infielder for us in a pinch if we needed one. And then Joe Gallagher is really more of a first baseman than anything else, but that bat for the number 9 prospect in baseball, who's having a monster year in Albany, hitting .270 with 48 homers and 101 ribbies through his first 100 games. Just incredible power there. Doesn't help us defensively if we were to lose one of those middle infielders, but if we lost a first baseman / DH / corner outfielder, having Gallagher around to help us certainly makes me feel better. So feel like we've got redundancy in the organization that could contribute at the major league level if we do have any injuries, so it didn't feel like we needed to chase after Badio, even though he'd clearly be an upgrade because he could take over at second, and that would let us pivot Seifu to third, move Edwards into more of a utility role. But at this point, he's gone to Chicago, and it's not an option, but I'm not really regretting that we didn't end up with him, because although it would be an incremental improvement to our team, I think the price was just too high, and we're already a first-place team without him. And it's been a pretty mediocre end to the month of July for us. We took 2 out of 3 in Toronto, but then we just lost 2 out of 3 in Boston. So we've been a .500 team since the All-Star break. That said, no one else in the division is playing well at all. Atlanta's lost 6 in a row, and the Phillies have lost 7 in a row. So despite our mediocre play over our last 10, and even longer than that at this point, we've extended the lead to 2 over the Braves and 2.5 over the Phillies as we head towards the trade deadline. And I don't think we're going to do anything here. I'm going to give it one final look and spend a little time offline perusing what is available and who else is just kind of out there in general, but not optimistic that we're actually going to end up making a deal. And I don't think there's anything for us to do. Taking a look at where we stand as of the end of the month of July, we are first or second offensively in almost every offensive category. Most importantly, runs scored. We are first, second, or third, or fourth in pretty much in every pitching category that's important. Average defensively, but we're 16 and 11 this month. 58 and 44 record, but Pythagorean expectations are 8 games better than that. We've gotten a bit unlucky with an 8 and 14 record in 1-run games, so I think it's very conceivable that despite the fact we've got a 568 winning percentage right now, that we could play 600 ball or better in August and September, given that we're 2 games up on in the division. Think it's realistic that if we do go out and play 600 ball the rest of the way with a 2-game lead, we're going to end up winning the division going away most likely. So I just don't feel like there's a need to really push on anything this year. So I think we are going to run with who we've already brung, so to speak, the rest of the way. And as we move to the month of the August and prepare for the stretch run, Jenneret, not surprisingly, was the NL's top hitter in July. 306 average, 12 homers, 25 ribbies, 27 runs scored. So as we've talked about, not that his season was bad beforehand, but he's definitely bringing it up to another level. Probably not going to lead the league in ribbies for a third consecutive year. Making up 18 ribbies on Tatis Jr. over the last 2 months of the season would be difficult. Seifu's still running away with the stolen base crown, not just for the National League, but for all of baseball. Seifu's 5.6 batter WAR, the best in the National League. Barajas has an ERA below 2 right now. Carrijo tied for the league lead in wins at this point. So the season's going pretty well. It's just going to be a matter of continuing to play some good baseball over the last couple months of the season, and then hopefully remaining healthy for the playoffs. Right now we are in a pretty good position injury-wise. Mems is still on the IL. We were very cautious with him, even though it was only a week-long injury, given that he's fragile and given that we've got so much pitching. Want to make sure that our closer is healthy and available for the playoffs, because he's been outstanding in the 1 year that he's likely going to be with us. 0.83 ERA and 40 strikeouts over 32 and a third innings. The whip is a ridiculous 0.64, but not critical that we have him healthy in late July and early August. May be critical that we have him healthy for October, so that's why we were very conservative with Mr. Mems. And as I mentioned, the key storyline in the next episode and for the rest of the season is just going to be maintaining the lead in the NL East and ensuring that this team is as healthy as possible for the playoffs. But what happens with the two really hot guys, Jenneret and Seifu, is going to be critical when we get to the off season. We've talked a lot about Jenneret potentially opting out and giving us the opportunity to bring back Seifu. Seifu remains on a hot streak, having a fantastic season for us. 325 average now, 37 doubles, 11 triples, 62 of 66 on the base paths, already has scored 86 runs. Could be on the way to a MVP award, which would really burnish his Hall of Fame credentials. Thinking about that extension, the number with his incredible season keeps going up. As we've talked about, though, given the lack of any financial flexibility in our budget right now, we just can't make him an offer. I mean, if I wanted to be very gamey, I could cut scouting and player development down to bare bones, sign him to an extension, and then push those back up. But that's one house rule that I won't tinker with here during the regular season. So we may have to spend a little more if we have the opportunity to bring him back and decide to bring him back than we would have otherwise if I had tinkered with the settings. But going to try to play things as if there is some oversight of my behavior by ownership. So, can Seifu win an MVP award? Can the Wings have the best record in baseball for a fourth consecutive season? And will we be healthy for the playoffs? I'd say those are the three big storylines over the rest of this 2036 regular season. And we'll find out the answers to all of those questions and probably some others in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.